How's it going? And welcome to episode 179 of On the Wire, proud member of the Pitcher List Podcast Network. Follow the pod on the Twitter at On the Wire Pod. Of course, you could follow us on the YouTube as well at the same handle. I am Adam Howe. You can follow me at 80 grade. That's all spelled out. Kevin Hasting. You followed at Hasting Kevin. Got a great show for you lined up today. That's not a sentence, but I'm going to leave it in there anyway. With the 23rd FAAB run upon us of the 2024 season, Kevin. I'm going to stop talking now so that we can actually say words that people will understand. How you doing? Good to have you back.
Oh, I'm doing great. Thank you, Adam. Yeah, we hopefully it's words people can understand and still until I start forgetting players' names that everybody knows. Like I'm known to do a couple of
It's a
times
fun
each
game to
episode.
play at home. Like,
But
who is Kevin thinking of?
yeah, who's he talking about? No, yeah, but yeah, this is great. I'm having a blast. Of course, the Royals are in it. They're in this 20 game stretch I talked about last week, 4-3 so far, including 3 out of 4 versus Cleveland that did briefly get them to a tie for first place in the AL Central. And oh man, this is going to be we have this weekend and 4 weeks to go. I've talked a couple of times throughout the season about my first ever main event team. I started off the season really strong, went through a month-long or more slump, and it took me a long time to stop the bleeding, as I think I said a few weeks ago, but I've been creeping back up, and at the moment, I am back tied for first place.
Nice.
This weekend and 4 weeks to go. This is
Yeah.
it's gonna be a blast, but it's gonna be a stressful blast.
Yeah. That's what this time of year is, whether you're doing a main event or you got your head-to-head playoffs coming up or already in progress.
Yeah.
Um, you're doing it right, by the way, if you're already in progress in your head-to-head playoffs. Just the way you put that schedule together. Avoid the last 2 weeks of the season if at all possible. And as we'll talk about in a couple weeks when we get closer and closer to those FAAB runs, it's going to be complete chaos as far as like who's available, who's spending money, and all that. So you never know what's actually going to happen in those last 2 weeks of the season. My Sox are the first team looking in from the outside currently. And so we will just continue to, try to tread water and try to jump right back in as best we can. I lost my camera, didn't I?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You did go away.
All right, that's fine. We'll work on that. And while we do that, though, let's get into some actual news and notes that have happened throughout the course of the last week. And we're gonna try to. There it is. Hey, that's the wrong camera, but that's okay. All right, we got lots of news to go over, Kevin, and we will do that. And hopefully I can fix my camera while you're answering some of these questions. Let's start off with some promotions we talked about off air before as a reminder, and we'll let everybody else know. We are going to start seeing rosters expand. They don't expand the way they once did. They only expand 2 roster spots, but we were getting a couple of call-ups prior to that September 1st roster expansion date. Let's start in Anaheim, who they will be calling up a couple of pitching prospects, at least one to go into the rotation in Caden Dana, coming up from Double-A, skipping Triple-A altogether. And then also a piece that they got from the Phillies, who will be our first, from what I read, our first Italian born and raised player to make it to the major leagues in Sam Aldegheri. So keep an eye on those Angels pitchers. Are you expecting them to be useful in any way from a fantasy perspective after their major league debuts this weekend?
I don't think so, unfortunately. Looking ahead on roster resource, Jason has both of them starting this weekend. Aldegari on Friday, it appears, and then Dana on Sunday, both versus Seattle. And I would be intrigued by those with as much as Seattle strikes out. But then he's got Griffin Canning, Kokonovich, Carson Fulmer, Tyler Anderson, Jose Siriano all lined up next Tuesday through Saturday. So it doesn't appear to me like we may see them next week with some of these other guys coming back. So yeah, I would be interested in formats where it's daily pickups for this weekend. I would consider both of these versus Seattle for the strikeout potential, especially Dana being the right-hander. Seattle's been just horrible versus righties as far as strikeouts go all season, but I really think that's about it for right now.
All right, awesome. And as I try to figure out my own personal technical issues, I am now Kevin, for those watching at home, and you are now Adam, according to our sheet. So we'll deal with that. Nobody cares as they're listening to this on audio, and you're missing out on all of the technical fun difficulties that I'm having today. So the other call-up worth talking about is another top prospect here, but this time coming out of Cincinnati. The Reds have announced, and we were recording this on Thursday, so we haven't seen his start yet. But Rhett Lauder, probably their top pitching prospect, is slated to start game 1 of their doubleheader on Friday. Do you expect this to be a one and done? Let's just see what you got. Or are you planning on bidding on him for future starts for the Reds the rest of the way?
I haven't seen Adam. Is he considered the 27th man for the doubleheader?
No, good question. It's not what I read. I mean, I read that it was a straight up call up.
Yeah, I thought so
It's
too.
not
So I would expect
because
him
the
to
rosters
stay
are
up.
expanding. It may not even matter.
Yeah, that's what I was looking at, and I couldn't find that for certain either. But the way that it's been presented, I agree with you. In which case, I would think we'll continue to see him. Once again, looking ahead on roster resource, he does not have a starter listed for Cincinnati for next Friday at the New York Mets. So I think if he performs in this doubleheader on Friday, that he probably sticks and we see him at the Mets next weekend. And I would be interested. Yeah, the Mets have been putting up some runs. We've seen Francisco Lindor just going absolutely nuts trying to run Shohei Ohtani down in the MVP race. And but I'm not going to run away and hide from the Mets, especially in that ballpark. It's fairly friendly to pitching. So yeah, I think it does appear that he could stick here. It would obviously depend on how he performs on Friday versus Milwaukee.
Yeah, I mean, of course, we're a little bit behind the 8 ball here as we've still got like 3 or 4 days before our FAAB bids need to go in, and we'll have a little bit more certainty as to his status on the roster by the time bids go in. But the Reds are not exactly fighting for a playoff spot. It'd be nice and like you said last week, you reminded me that days on the roster don't matter in September. It'll only come down to innings pitched if he hits that threshold, which I don't foresee happening, even if he stays on the roster and starts every 5th day from here on out. So I think Lauder, not that it's easy for a pitcher to win Rookie of the Year in general. Obviously, we have a strong front runner this year, but it's not common. But you still I'm sure the Reds still want him to keep his rookie eligibility for next year on the chance that, he breaks camp and he can run after that opportunity. So we've got some call-ups, of course, that comes with some call-downs. Not a word, but that's okay. We got some releases. We got some options. Let's start with let's go right to our injury note here of note. David Hamilton, as we talked about my Red Sox a little bit earlier, he hits the IL with finger injury, and we probably are not going to see him anytime soon, unless it's just one of those things where he can put, a mitt on it and play through the pain But I think that even if he does come back in that capacity in an early state, I would expect Hamilton to be limited to more of a pinch running role rather than an everyday role. Nick Sogard is recalled to take his place on the roster and, in theory, in the middle infield as an option in the middle infield. You know, are you dropping Hamilton at this point? Assuming, even if he does come back, it's going to be just as limited as it was prior, or are those stolen bases that he can bring to the table enough to kind of hold on to that, depending on where you might be sitting in that category?
I think in most spots, I'd let him go, right? After this weekend, we have 4 weeks. He's probably missing most of, if not 2 of those, half that time. And if you think he's going to get some stolen bases those past couple weeks, he comes back after a minimum stay, bid on him again. Would be my thought here. Yeah, I think unfortunately have to let him go. Sogard is interesting. He doesn't do a whole lot, any one thing really great, but he can kind of sprinkle around a little bit of help in any category and in a good lineup. It's intriguing with Rafael Devers banged up the last couple of days. Sogard is in the lineup at third base on Thursday. I kind of expect we'll see what we saw earlier in the season when we talked about it specifically here on the show, the flexibility that Rafaela gives him. I think we may see him back to the outfield and Sogard back at one of those middle infield positions, as you brought up.
Yeah, I mean, I'm expecting Sogard pretty much to be just in that, second base, maybe fill in the other middle infield spot, shortstop, of course, every once in a while, but mostly I think second base is where we're going to see him the most. If there's anything close to regular playing time, that is, which I also do not foresee happening, at least not with that lineup. All right, the other, we'll get into some releases here. One that kind of stood out on its own was the Chicago White Sox actually making moves to thin out their roster as thin as it can possibly get, I guess. They let go of supposed closer John Brebbia. I say supposed because how many games are the White Sox actually closing out at this point? Is this just like a win-win situation? Brebbia doesn't have to play for the White Sox anymore, and the White Sox, can cut bait with a small contract for the remainder of the season. And then, I mean, dare I ask, is there anybody in that bullpen worth looking into to actually collect like the over-under on any one pitcher from that bullpen? Total saves the rest of the way. I'm going to go with 2.5. And are you taking the under on that?
Yeah, I would take the under on that. I just feel like they're going to win more than 2 games, but I no idea if there's going to be a save opportunity in there. Zero confidence in any of these guys in closing out that save opportunity. So yeah, I'm not even the slightest bit interested in who may be pitching in the 9th inning for the Chicago White Sox.
Now, does Brebbia actually can he go anywhere else and actually do anything? I'm not expecting him to take over a close. I don't over under on saves for Brebbia the rest of the way is still a half, and I'll still take the under. But can he go, like, they did him a favor by cutting him before, at this point, as we'll get into the whole bunch of releases or waivers being placed today, because that gives them enough time to be claimed and then put on a roster to be eligible for playoffs. I'm just curious to see if Brebbia actually, just one of those things where it's like, oh, fine, new scenery. I'm just happy to be out of there, and I can do some good things for a good team.
Yeah, I don't know if he's gonna get a shot or not. I doubt it's for saves. He might get 1 or 2 depending on where he lands, but I don't think he's gonna go in anywhere and get regular opportunities in the 9th, and I'm not so sure he even gets claimed. It's just hasn't been good in the second half. I mean, his overall numbers for the season, he's got a 6.29 ERA, but just looking back through his game log, he was cruising along. A lot of zeros in the run category up through mid-July. But all of a sudden, since just before the All-Star break, an earned run, 3 earned runs, an earned run, a 0, 3 earned runs, 3 earned runs. He put 4 zeros together, and then he's given up runs in 2 of the last 3, including 4 on over the weekend versus Detroit of all teams. So I don't even think he's going to get claimed.
That'll be too bad. That'll be too bad because then he'll still be on the White Sox. Luckily for him, his contract is up. He's a free agent, and then he can test those waters. When the time comes. I said there's a whole bunch of other waiver placements, so I'm going to lump all these guys together, and I'm just curious. Like I said, they've all been put. By the time you're listening to this, they'll all have been claimed or not claimed. You'll know where they're going to be playing come September 1st, where they'll be eligible for the playoff rosters. But talk to me about, of this list, who are you expecting to be claimed by a playoff contending team with an actual need, which would then in turn make us as fantasy managers more interested in them from their previous stance. So couple of Giants in here, St. Louis, Texas, a couple other options here. Thairo Estrada, Taylor Rogers, which I told you off air was the most disappointing to me because now the Roger brothers are not on the same team anymore, and that just seems like a bad thing. Tyler Matzik, and then outside of San Francisco, we have Tommy Pham, Robbie Grossman, Travis Jankowski, and then Nicky Lopez, all hitting waivers. First and foremost, do you expect any of these guys to not get claimed? And then we'll go to the second part where it's like who has the most to the gain from being claimed by a new team?
Well, so I told you before we started recording that I would love if he makes it to them for the Royals to snag Thairo Estrada. I know he's having a down year. It's only hitting about 220, 9 home runs, a couple of stolen bases, but he's had 14 home runs each of the last 2 seasons and over 20 stolen bases each of them. Had the broken hand last season, been banged up at times this season. I think this is somebody that with a little bit of a change of scenery may get going again. He's not gonna, I don't think, put up all-star numbers, but the 15-20 pace that he's done the last couple of seasons, I think he could give a team for the last month. So I would love to see that, and I think he will definitely be picked up. I'd also love for my Royals to grab Taylor Rogers with some of the bullpen issues they've had recently. I think he definitely gets picked up. I think Tommy Pham will find a team. Probably Robbie Grossman. Travis Jankowski is one of those guys that teams, when they have 2 extra roster spots, they like having a speed guy to pinch run late in games and a defensive replacement. The 2 I'd be worried about are Tyler Matzik. We haven't seen much of Matzik this year due to injury, and Nicky Lopez. I'm not sure if anybody will give him a shot. They may just wait and sign him during free agency as a utility infielder during the off season. But the other guys, the older veterans are I think could land with some teams with playoff aspirations as utility defensive players and base runners here.
Yeah, it's interesting because Rogers is actually, I expect anybody with any history in the bullpen to be picked up easily. Like they don't have to be a closer, they don't have to be high leverage. It's just you need that depth, you need that experience in there. And Rogers still got a contract through the 2025 season. So whoever's grabbing him, in theory, I'm assuming they're going to get to be able to pay that minimum and then also have him for that contract. I would assume that means San Francisco's on the hook for the remainder of that contract anyway, just the way waivers are constructed. Please tweet at me and correct me if I'm wrong on that, anybody out there. But I'm not surprised to see, like, literally this seems to be Tommy Pham's career trajectory every year now, either to get traded at the last possible second or to be waived and then picked up. And as soon as he finds a new home, he'll hit 3 home runs in 5 days. And then you'll stop thinking about him altogether. So think about that history for your head-to-head playoffs. You're going to want those 3 home runs in that week wherever he ends up landing. So just Lopez, I agree, it would be the one that I would assume either doesn't get picked up and is just continuously stuck where he is as well, and then roll the dice in free agency and see where that takes him in the offseason.
Yeah, Nicky Lopez may join John Brebbia as still playing for the Chicago White Sox for one more month.
All right, so let's just go to our signing that happened earlier on, and then it looks like he's finally gonna pass his physical and all that good stuff. And that's Jason Hayward. We talked about, I think, last week when he was cut by the Dodgers. He found a new home with the Houston Astros, expected to be on that active roster over the weekend. Was this a good spot for Hayward to land as far as playing time goes, as far as opportunity? Does it make you more or equally interested in him than when he was with the Dodgers playing as much as he was?
I think equally. I think we'll see him quite a bit on the strong side of the platoon there in Houston. He's got a couple of RBIs tonight, Thursday evening against the Royals. I think we'll see more of the same that we saw in Los Angeles for Jason Hayward in Houston.
I just interesting because it's all the quotes from Freddie Freeman when he was talking about how Hayward was people were having a hard time getting a hold of him, or he wasn't answering. He's like, I'm paraphrasing. He's like, the dude just got fired from his job. Like, leave him alone. He doesn't want to talk to you right now. I'm pretty happy. Like, somebody who just wants to play found a pretty positive landing spot when it comes, on a major league deal, playing for a playoff contending team. And can actually make an impact, even as simply as a veteran presence, if nothing else. So good on him.
Right, and he had a great defensive play in his first game for Houston tonight, which is what he's really known for, and why the Cubs gave him such a huge contract way back when. So I think he'll be in the lineup versus righties the rest of the season, and you could probably do a lot worse in especially 15-team 5 outfielder leagues. You could do a lot worse than Jason Hayward when he's in the lineup.
There you go. Uncle Ted reminding us he actually got 2 RBI on top of that as well. So doing it with the bat in his first day out there as well. Somebody else returning to hopefully their quote glory days. Rhys Hines finds his way back to Cincinnati with Stuart Fairchild set to have surgery to repair a ligament in his thumb. Fairchild saying that it was something he'd just been trying to play through and obviously couldn't do it any further. So they threw him in the IL and brought back Rhys Hines. Can Rhys Hines bring back the magic that we saw when he first came back up? Is there playing time for him in Cincinnati now that they giving him another opportunity at the major league level?
I don't think there is for the first half of this week. I don't think we see him maybe at all. We haven't seen him yet, and he's been back for 3 games. They've faced all right-handed pitching, and they do for the first half of this week as well. But as I'm going to bring up when I bring up a player later in the show, Cincinnati does face 2 lefties over the weekend, and 2 out of 3 is enough for me when we're looking at weekend lineups, especially when I have Jock Peterson on so many teams.
Right.
And Arizona's going to face 2 lefties next weekend. So I need a replacement for Jock Peterson for the weekend, and Rhys Hines would be an option. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, these are the things that you got to be paying attention to on a granular level throughout the month of September. Actually literally having platoon splits on your own bench, being prepared for when you actually need to activate them. So the fact that you're working on that, Kevin, just gives me all the confidence in the world.
I have certain weeks. It doesn't always work out this week, but certain weeks when that's my plan going in, as soon as the games start on Monday and Tuesday, I change my lineup for Friday and make that change just so I don't forget
Oh,
about it
yeah,
because
sure.
it's fresh in my mind. I knew why I made those moves. I know why he's on my roster at the moment. I want him in my lineup this weekend. I do it right away as soon as the games get going early in the week.
Exactly. All right. So last thing here, we'll head over to the Yankees. They have a couple of rehab stints that are continuing to happen. One on the pitching side, one on the hitting side. First, we'll start with Clark Schmidt. He got moved over to, I believe, AAA to finish up some rehab, and it was announced he started on Wednesday, and he should get one more start before being reevaluated and expected to return back to the Yankees. But with this kind of movement happening, are you expecting to, where he may still be available, bid on him this weekend in preparation for his return to the Yankees rotation, possibly by the end of next week? Even if you end up having to stash him for a week, because we just don't know.
Yeah, maybe. And this is another thing I've started looking ahead at, and this is the reason that I am try to be very conservative with my FAAB throughout the season. As I've mentioned the last 2, 3, 4 weeks, I'm getting down there in FAAB dollars remaining as well. But in most of my leagues, I have more than many of my competitors. And more importantly, I have much more than those I'm competing with in the leagues where I still have a shot. So a move like this, if I feel that I still have all the coverage for my backup spots for Friday when I can change my lineup, grabbing somebody like Clark Schmidt now could be very beneficial because, as you brought up last week, and we'll start talking more and more about each week, some of the starting pitchers that we've been counting on all season may begin to go away, whether it's the young guys reaching innings limits or the veterans that are going to be saved for the postseason that last week or two of the season. Guys like this, like Clark Schmidt, could be very beneficial to us as long as he's going to get out there and get us 5 innings and qualify for the win for a team like the Yankees.
Yeah, those 2 start weeks are going to be pretty rare in general across the board
Mhm.
throughout the month of September, in conjunction with the limits that you just pointed out, but of course also the expanded rosters. A lot of teams are going to use both of those roster spots for pitchers, and then a lot of teams I expect to go to a 6-man rotation, or at least some kind of extended rotation where they're utilizing those off days more so than they were before. So it might still be a 5-man rotation instead of cutting to a 4-man rotation on those with those off days and stuff like that. So the more innings that you can find, the better. And then the other half of this rehab watch for the Yankees, Anthony Rizzo played first base the other day. During his rehab, the Yankees said that he's going to be reevaluated in New York as early as Friday. So we'll have a better sense of his return. Is this a situation where if you trust the Yankees, trust that he's healthy, he comes back up? Is he playing every day at first base? Is he playing on a regular basis where you're actually interested, where you might need that kind of help?
If he's healthy and the Yankees feel he's back up to speed, he is playing every day because Anthony Rizzo, at the worst we've seen of him, and we've seen bad runs from him, especially when it was injury related. But at his worst, he's better than what DJ LeMahieu is right now and being run out there at first base every day. I think the Yankees are very anxious to get Rizzo back. So I would definitely be interested.
Yeah. Yeah. Rizzo's just also one of those players where if he's not healthy, I don't see them actually activating him. It's like there's not going to be, even though, Rizzo maybe at 95%, 90% is still better than what, we're seeing at a DJ LeMahieu at the moment. That's not somebody that, Rizzo's not somebody that they're going to, I think, kind of push the envelope on. So it's one of those things where if he stays healthy and they activate him, I'm going to trust as much as possible that he actually is, and we'll see him produce. All right. Well, that was the news worthy of talking about from a FAAB perspective for your consideration for this weekend. Of course, there's a whole bunch of other stuff. You should be listening to the First Pitch podcast every day with KC Bubba or Jake Crumpler on the weekends. They break down all the news, highlights, and observations from every day's worth of games, as well as looking ahead at each slate to keep you up to date with everything you need to know to win your fantasy leagues. And Nick Pollock has you covered on the starting pitching front with his Plus Pitch podcast. He highlights every starting pitching performance from the day prior and looking ahead at streaming options for the next day as well. So keep an eye and ears open for both of those podcasts on the daily. And we will get into some actual recommendations here, category by category. We're going to do that right after this quick break. All right, we are back. Let's get into these recommendations to spend what little FAAB dollars you guys have left. And this is where it comes in handy to have multiple options. Get those FAAB bids, get those waterfall bids in so that at least you get something. The last thing you really want to do is have, a blank spot on your roster that handcuffs you and doesn't allow you to actually make any kind of moves, adjustments on the weekends for your hitters, et cetera, et cetera. So, Kevin, I need some power. I need some home runs. I need some RBI. What options do I have out there?
Yeah, I got a couple of guys that are pretty much 12-team guys. They're not quite universally rostered in 15s, but they are both at 98% in the main event. First, we've talked about him a couple of times over the past few weeks. That's MJ Melendez. If you look at his overall numbers, they're not good, but he has been really good in the month of August, and really since before the All-Star break. It just didn't start showing up in results, but he was hitting the ball hard. He was having good at-bats. The Royals face 6 right-handed starting pitchers this coming week. This month, as I said, August, he's been on fire. He's hitting .318. He's got 5 home runs, 12 RBI, 11 runs, so he's filling up the stat categories. 1 stolen base. And for the entire season, all 17 of his home runs have come against right-handed pitching. So with the 6 right-handed starters that the Royals are set to face, this is one of those that I talk about quite often. Yes, he's 98% rostered in the main event, only 21% in the 12-team RotoWire Online Championships, and he is absolutely 12-team viable for 12-team 5 outfielder leagues, I would say. Similarly, Joe Adele, 98% rostered in 15s. He's 78% rostered in 12s as well, but in those almost 1/4 of 12-team leagues, I'd be looking at him this week, especially in NFBC formats. This is the guy I was talking about that gets to face 2 lefties next weekend when I have to bench Jock Peterson. Joe Adele is an option. He'll see 2 lefties as well over the weekend. All 8 of his home runs in only 100 plate appearances versus lefties this season. His OPS is over 900 versus lefties. As bad as his overall numbers look, he has crushed lefties this season. And then, as Uncle Ted brought up just a couple of minutes ago in the chat, I have Andres Chaparro in Washington, hitting 3rd or 4th most days, drops down in the lineup a little bit versus lefties usually. But he showed a lot of power in the minor leagues, and so far so good, holding his own for Washington and hitting in a good spot in the lineup. He's available in 40% of 15-team leagues and almost all 12s.
Yeah, I mean, it's always, you always point it out, and you do a great job of this. It's just the difference in some of these guys between their rosterships in the main event versus the online chain, those 15s versus those 12s. It's always like I'm more interested in them if there is that kind of the giant gap, that 98% to 21%. It's like, listen, like it's still the same roster size. Yes, there's 3 extra teams, but the fact is that if it's that viable in a 15, like there's really no reason it should be as big of a gap as that, especially at this point in the season.
Especially in the weeks when they have the preferential matchups, right? Because in 15s, they're probably just getting played almost weekly and in lineups. In 12s, you don't have to do that, but that's an advantage. You only have to use them when they have those matchups.
Exactly. and you got to be paying attention to that, of course, to make sure that you're not, setting and forgetting, and you're actually making those adjustments. And your roster and your bench is built so that you can make those adjustments. All right, so we got some power options out there, especially in your 12 teamers, but they're still available in your 15 teamers as well. So if I need the speed, Kevin, we need some stolen bases, we need some runs scored. Who's out there to help us out in these categories?
Yeah, this was a little surprising to me, but Blake Perkins, since being recalled, or no, coming back off the IL, I believe, he has started 6 straight games in center field for Milwaukee. 4 of those games versus right-handed starters, 2 versus left-handed starters. It appears that Milwaukee is playing Perkins over Mitchell. I would guess, unless he really falters, this is what they want to do the rest of the way, or I don't know why they would be doing it just over this past week. So I think Blake Perkins is the everyday center fielder in Milwaukee for the rest of the season. And he only has 1 stolen base, I believe, since coming back. It's only been 6 games, those 6 straight starts I mentioned. But on the season, he's 17 for 21. So if he's going to get the everyday playing time, I think the stolen bases will come for Blake Perkins. And he's available almost everywhere. 18% rostered in main events, only 7% in the online championships.
Yeah, I mean, if Perkins is playing, I expect him to run. Like he's already shown that. It's his history, it's his calling card. It's what I kind of said a couple of weeks ago. I was hoping when he did get the call back up that he'd be playing on a regular basis, and I'd be a lot more interested for that reason. The timing does seem weird. I haven't
Yeah, it
seen
just came
any
out of
kind
nowhere. All of a sudden, he's playing every day.
He's on the IL, came off the IL, and yeah. And now all of a sudden, Sal Frelick and Garrett Mitchell are splitting time in right field, and center field is completely belonging to Perkins, regardless of matchup. So, yeah, and he's also, batting, he's batting second against the lefties. So, every once in a while, he's getting an extra bonus points for those kind of matchups as well, being toward the top of the lineup. So, great call out for Perkins, especially if you are in the need for speed. Now, if we just need as much volume as possible, we've got some opportunities ahead of ourselves with a couple of long weeks for a couple teams and some weird off days as well. So let's get through some schedule notes before getting to the actual player recommendations. A handful of teams, 7 games next week. Tampa Bay, Minnesota, Oakland, Seattle, Texas, Pittsburgh, and Arizona all get a full 7-game slate. Toronto is the lone team that has the 2 off days, and they will have their normal Monday and Tuesday off days. But a couple of teams with just the 1 off day decided to play during the holiday and take Tuesday off instead. So it doesn't really impact you a whole lot as far as like your lineup changes in your NFBC formats and what have you. But keep an eye on your daily moves leagues, and if you need to volume your way into more playing time on Monday or Tuesday, you're going to have to make adjustments. If you have players on Detroit, Houston, San Diego, Cincinnati, they will all be off on Tuesday instead of on Monday. Colorado is going to be away all week, 3 in Atlanta and 3 in Milwaukee. Cincinnati will be home for half, 3 versus Houston, and then they travel to New York to play the Mets for 3 over the weekend. So not a whole lot of games happening in those hitter-friendly ballparks. But as Kevin, as you mentioned, more interested in the fact that Colorado will be rocky roading in Atlanta and in Milwaukee. So if there's any opportunity to stream pitchers from those teams, you're going to want to keep an eye out on those matchups as well and availability. With all that in mind and anything else you want to consider, who's got a good opportunity ahead of themselves for this week that is worth, starting to roster a little bit more than they currently are?
I absolutely did run and check at who Colorado would be facing as starting pitching, and unfortunately, it's 6 guys that are rostered everywhere.
All rostered, yeah,
So
sure.
but that is the first place I looked. But for opportunity this week, I mentioned Trevor Larnach, probably 3 or 4 weeks ago in the power category. He's been hitting second in the lineup versus right-handed pitching, sitting versus lefties. So this is a little tricky this week, but uh, he's only 11% rostered in 12 teamers, 81% in 15s. Another big gap here. I kind of get it with outfielders, 5 outfielder leagues, 12 to 15. That's 15 players that more that are rostered in the 15s. So with outfielders, sometimes it makes a little more sense to me when there's the big gap. But still, it does appear Minnesota has a 7-game week, but the reason I said this could be tricky is they do appear to be facing 3 lefties of those 7. However, one of those is I forget. I got it real quick though. I got it here. Tyler Alexander of Tampa Bay. He hasn't went 5 innings in a couple of months. So I fully expect that we would see um, Larnack in that game. Maybe not start, although he might. But so I think we get him 3 out of 4 early in the week versus Tampa. And then he's another one of the guys that versus Kansas City, then he would still get 2 out of 3. He wouldn't probably be in the lineup versus Cole Reagans on Friday. So I think it's more of a 5-game thing, which is really I want at least 5 when I'm looking at these guys. But I think with it being Tyler Alexander on Tuesday, we see Larnack either start or get in the game after just a couple of times through the lineup. So I would be comfortable using Trevor Larnack this week.
Yeah, I mean, this opportunity isn't just about how many games you have. It's obviously who you're going to be playing and what opportunity your team is going to give you as well. So, again, another one of those splits on rostership as well, 81% in the main and only 11% in those 12s. So you got to look at what opportunity they have to prove to yourself when you're looking through this. I think it's also really easy when you're looking through the free agent list of players to really just handcuff yourself and to be like, well, this guy's not rostered. Like, he must not be good. If you're really just looking at surface level stuff, I think it's just really easy to kind of like convince yourself of that. So really kind of pushing through that and knowing the process behind your decision making as far as your matchups, your opportunities, and what have you, is gonna go a lot further to pick up the right guys and that are gonna give you the best chance. All right, a lot of hitting options out there. We'll get into some pitching options right after this quick break. All right, Kevin, we need wins, we need Ks, we need to volume our way into those categories. Who is, and as we talked about before, innings really at this point is the name of the game, especially when you're trying to qualify for the win, especially when you're trying to volume your way into strikeouts. Guys don't always have to have a 30% strikeout rate. Like, as long as they can go, 6 innings, 7 innings, and still get 5 or 6 strikeouts in those starts because of the volume, that's going to be something of consideration as well. We're looking at very short instances at this point of the season. We don't need somebody that's going to be there for you the rest of the way. So who's still out there that can help us this week in those categories?
Well, I'm almost afraid to say both of these names for different reasons, but mainly the same reason. They have not performed well this season. But as of late, and with the matchups that he has this week, um, you know, Patrick Corbin just put up a 0 on the New York Yankees for 6 innings with 6 strikeouts. In the start prior to that, he got the rocky road we were just talking about, and we had talked about him. Yes, I would use him for that start. 8 strikeouts, 1 earned run. It was a solo home run, 6 innings there as well. And even the start before that, only 4 1/3 at Philadelphia, but Philadelphia's lineup, 2 earned runs in 4 1/3. I take that. So Patrick Corbin has been pitching pretty well over the last 3 or 4 starts, and he gets at Miami, and at Pittsburgh this week. I would not make this move. I say this a lot when we're talking our starting pitchers. I would not make this move if I do have an opportunity to gain in ERA and WHIP, or there's multiple teams right behind me that can pass me in ERA and WHIP. But if I'm chasing wins and strikeouts, Patrick Corbin is available almost everywhere. He is over 20% rostered in main events, 1% in 12s. And yes, this time of year, these matchups, I would throw him out there in a 12. The other is a little more rostered, but hasn't been much more successful this season. He's on the opposite end of his career, and he's somebody, if he could stop walking the ballpark, that could be great. I think he will be a great pitcher at some point. Has not been so far due to all the walks. So once again, if you're protecting ratios or trying to track somebody down in pitching ratios, you can't do this. But Joe Boyle gets Seattle, who we talked about, strikes out a ton versus righties, and Detroit, and he gets them both in Oakland. So these are two guys, and this is kind of where we're at with anybody we can find, even with good matchups this time of year. Probably going to be a big risk in the ratio department, but for wins and Ks, in the leagues where we have a cushion in our ratios, or in the leagues we're not worried about people catching us in ratios, yeah, I'll throw Patrick Corbin and Joe Boyle with these matchups. I'd throw them both in the same league if that opportunity arose.
Is Joe Boyle getting those matchups for next week? I've got some. The way I'm seeing it is,
I have him Seattle Monday and Detroit then on Sunday, because they are on a 6-man rotation.
right. Okay. Yeah. The other probables I'm seeing is that he'll probably be starting on Saturday against Texas, and if he does do that, if that ends up being the case, then obviously that throws a little bit of a wrinkle into what kind of matchups he gets for next week. But we'll know for certain what actually ends up happening with Joe Boyle and the A's rotation as the things go. So I could just be looking at the wrong estimations or the wrong sources. So I won't throw my sources under the bus, because I'm sure other people will figure it out as well. But yeah, with those matchups, I would like it better. Is that in Seattle or in Oakland?
Oakland.
So, I mean, in Oakland's always a good pitching situation. But for whatever reason, as much as Seattle strikes out, they strike out even more at home. So
Everybody does. That's one of the,
yes.
there's that talk of ballpark factors, strikeouts due to the batter's eye. And what I think it's Eno Saris that I've heard talk about this, probably. He talks about these. The batter's eye evidently isn't square with home plate. It's at an angle.
Gotcha.
Which that makes perfect sense, that could mess with your depth perception a little bit as far as seeing pitches.
Yeah, the other ballpark that I saw standing out in that factor was Citi Field as well. It seems as though all teams, but the Mets also strike out a whole lot more at home than they do on the road as well. So, park factors not just for offense. Keep an eye on. There's a lot of different factors that go into everything that happens in a ballpark. So a lot of them probably take with a grain of salt, but when you see extremes, you got to start taking notice. And the extremes that we're seeing in Seattle this year, kind of like how we saw the ball popping in Cleveland in the first half of the season as well. You got to at least take notice and make adjustments. All right. So I love the fact that you were very clear on those recommendations, that you put them in the categories specifically of the volume category. So now if we picked up these guys, we've got to balance it out with some ratio help, ERA, WHIP, stabilizers, or somebody that can actually chip away and get you where you need to be, or you're playing defense. There's a lot of different ways you're playing these ratio categories at this time of year. So who is going to help / at least not hurt you that you might consider adding to your roster if that's where your need is?
Yeah, Uncle Ted in the chat says, "Forget starters, go middle relievers this time of year." I agree, unless you really need wins and Ks, and your ratios don't matter, which is why I went with the starters I did in
Exactly.
that category. And now we'll talk about if we're protecting ratios. I'm probably sitting starters I already have on my roster in favor of some of these guys, and guys we've been bringing up for a few weeks. Ted's mentioned a couple of them here. Uceda in Tampa, Tyler Holton in Detroit has been great. Drew Rasmussen. I don't know if he's going to get stretched out. That's what last week you had the same feeling. Don't think he's probably going to get stretched out. But for this category, he's been great this season. And we talk about, I try to bring up a new name every week because all of these guys are probably available. Now, they're not available in every single league, but there's enough of them that, yes, several of them are available in every league. And the guy I want to add to our list this week is Dylan Lee in Atlanta. 51 innings pitched on the season, 59 strikeouts. So he's also getting a strikeouts when he's in there. 1.94 ERA, 1.08 WHIP. You have to go back over 2 months since he gave up multiple runs in an outing, and he's only given up 3 earned runs since then in over 2 months. And they're scattered out. It's very random when he gets hit for an earned run. So Dylan Lee's been great for 51 innings this year. He's projected for 11 or 12 innings in the projection, straight up and down for the rest of the season, which is a good number. It's only going to get him to the low 60s, but it would be on pace for being one of those 70 75 inning relievers. He's getting more time because of how he has performed this season. He has been sent down a couple of times this season. That is a bit of a worry. However, with the rosters expanding in 2 days, I don't foresee that happening. He's the guy they brought back every time they needed to fortify their bullpen. So I think he stays. They'll want him for September, especially when they start resting starters and relying on the bullpen a little more, if they do indeed catch a wild card spot here.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that you should, if you haven't been tracking these at home, come on, what are you doing? Obviously, a lot of people are not doing that. Hopefully, they get the little notebooks or their dry erase boards, and every time we add a name to this list, Kevin, that's what they're doing at home. Maybe I'll put one here on the wall, and we'll start doing that as a prop. But just the fact that these guys, they may not always be available at all times, but somebody is. One of them is. And
Right.
as long as you can get the volume out of their ERA, not only can help, but
Ryan Presley just came back off the IL. He's going to be available in a lot of leagues. So, we talk about some of these guys. Matt Strom in Philadelphia is always strong and usually has a lot of availability. It's just that, most people want to roster starters and closers. And so these guys are all going to have availability. Like I said, every one of them is not going to be available in every league, but a whole lot of them are.
Yeah, and you just got to find the ones that are going to get you as much volume, because that's why you want to start the starters, right? Because you're quote guaranteed to get the 4 to 6 innings of work, so you can chip away as much of the volume, and the ratios will have a bigger impact. But if you can just pick the right reliever, we're gonna, I think we're gonna start seeing a lot more reliever work throughout the course of September as well, especially on those playoff bound teams.
I agree. And they'll be part of our chasing wins because some of the starters aren't going to go 5.
Exactly. All right. Well, we have to chase saves, Kevin, as well. You mentioned Uceda already. We talked about him last week. We've got some other options in Tampa Bay that have been getting saves as well. Manuel Rodriguez in the mix, getting the last save for them. But I think Uceda is still the favorite to kind of help you in all categories. So I would still be rostering him wherever. But is there any other situation out there that's kind of worth fighting over as far as the save situations that might arrive?
not necessarily worth fighting over, but it seems to me, I don't think I have any new names this week, but some of there's been more movement over the past 3-4 weeks in the saves category than we saw for much of the season, and definitely more than what we saw last season when the closers were more stable than we'd seen in a long time. But all of these situations that we've been talking about recently, Martinez in Arizona, Ucita in Tampa, Urseg in Kansas City, most of these guys are nearly rostered everywhere, but not quite. So look, I think it's a lot of the same names we've been talking about over the past 2, 3, 4 weeks. Many of them, while nearly universally rostered, still have a little bit of availability, so it's worth checking. I would say one guy I was not in favor of last week, but this week, only not being in Coors Field for 7 nights, I'd be looking at Tyler Kinley in Colorado. Um, we've seen closers in Colorado be very valuable for us in the saves category. Sure, they might give up a 3-run home run at Coors Field, but we've seen a lot of value in Colorado closers over the past few years. So I wasn't interested last week when they had 7 games at home, but hitting the road this week, I would be interested there.
Yeah, just the fact they're on the road, sure. And yeah,
In spite of last week me saying he's pitched better at home, I still
he's
wasn't
fine. I mean, no,
into
the
that
thing is,
myself.
Kinley got beat up the other day. Came
Right.
back, did okay. But it's a White
And
Sox.
Shavili came in and actually ended up getting the save, right? Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, it makes things even more interesting that way. But
Yeah, I still think it's Kinley.
How many saves are the Rockies providing you? Like, there's a reason you're targeting Rockies on the road for those streaming options. So it's like you're hoping to get a win out of the opposing pitcher. You're hoping to get production in that realm. So it's like, yeah, maybe he pitches better because he's on the road, but what kind of opportunities is he actually going to be pitching in?
Yeah.
So I mean, that's the worry. You know what? Desperate times call for desperate measures. So it's definitely a call out worth thinking about. And if nobody else, it's one of those things where if nobody else is going to bid on him, you might as well bid on him at the same time.
Yeah, one specific thing, I said all the guys we've been talking about past couple weeks, check. Well, one to really check is it appears Sir Anthony Dominguez survived the couple of bad outings and got sent right back out there and got the save. And I think that's what most of us expected. Everybody I heard talking about it, I think thought he had a pretty long leash and was still going to be the guy, but he may have been dropped in some spots last week because he had a rough week a week ago.
Yeah, good call out there. And anybody kind of holding on to the hope, I guess, that Craig Kimbrell was going to come back. That's not happening. Let's just put that to bed into that role. Kevin, wild card, not a whole lot of room for error here to be playing around with your FAAB bids, but maybe there's just a player that just didn't fit perfectly into one of the other categories. What do you got for me to, just keep things interesting?
Adam, I sincerely apologize. I know this is your favorite category, but with this 1 month to go, and the fact that we are recording on August 29th, I don't really have anybody to speculate on. However, we're gonna know. We're gonna know on Sunday is September 1st. We're gonna know who is on the rosters. And so I feel like it's a cop out, and I do apologize for that, but I also feel like I'm not gonna speculate for 2 days when we're gonna know who's being called up prior to having to do our FAAB bids on Saturday or Sunday evening, excuse me.
Yeah, and it's just going to be interesting to see how teams actually utilize both those spots. Like I said earlier, I expect most of them to utilize them with 2 pitchers. But you're gonna have some situations where it's I'll be very surprised if I see any teams utilizing both spots for hitters. It just doesn't seem. I mean, maybe the White Sox do it just because, whatever. But I would expect more pitchers to be activated than hitters, especially in the top half of teams across baseball, giving us more opportunity to speculate on on that volume. Also having to make adjustments on who's going to actually pitch 2 days during a week and what have you. So. I don't think it's a cop out because of all the variables and of course of our schedule that we're recording in, kind of puts us in that situation as well. So something to keep an eye on. By the time you're listening to this, you'll have a better idea of those opportunities that are ahead that you can throw around all your extra FAAB dollars on, just to make speculative bids. We're not really in the business to make speculative bids heading into September anyway, though, right?
Right. Especially when by the time we're making those bids, we're gonna know a lot more.
Sure. All right. Well, with all that then in mind, Kevin, leave us with any kind of additional tidbits of information or advice heading into the 23rd FAAB run of the 2024 season.
I'm just gonna duplicate what I said last week. Just a little more time, digging in a little further on every little thing, looking at your opponents. I have leagues where it's tight at the top, and my opponents have $1, $2, $5 left in FAAB. That means if there's an obvious pickup for a spot they need, I'm picking them up. Right? They're just going the extra due diligence. Don't let anything slip through the cracks. I say it all the time. All the little things add up to a big thing, and bigger things this time of year.
Yeah, I mean, I just like the idea of playing defense. If you're able to, it's like if somebody else needs stolen bases, you don't, but at the same time, you can afford to pick up Perkins, do it. So it stops somebody else from chipping away at that category. That can do as much good in your standings as it can if you're just trying to chip away at the things that you have. So it really depends on where you stand in each category and what you can afford to do, of course. But if you can afford,
I have a league where second place is 21 saves behind me, but I haven't dropped Clase or Helsley yet because there's a lot of movement that it's really bunched up from like second to 10th.
Sure.
So I haven't dropped either one of those guys. Now, here in another week or two, I'll probably drop one of them. And then, sure, the last week I'll drop the other one. But I'm not making these guys available for people.
Yeah, they're 21 saves behind you, but there's other teams between you and them. So they can gain points.
Second place
the
is
gap
21
is 21
behind me, but then it's a big bunch. So I need pretty much 0 saves the rest of the year. And we'll finish first. But that's so bunched up that yes, teams that are near the top in the overall standings for the league can move up 6 or 7 spots if they had 1 or 2 of these guys. So yeah, I'm not dropping them.
No, I get that. Yeah, sure. All right. Well, with all that in mind and everything else to consider, that's going to wrap it up for episode 179 of On the Wire. I am Adam Howe on behalf of Kevin Hasting. Thanks for listening. We bid you goodbye.